Welcome to the What About Books podcast and my co-host, Herdy Burke. Hello, Herdy.
What's up, Danny?
Hey, just ready to talk about the question behind the question. Before anything, I want to bring up our sponsors. Our sponsors are Impact Mortgage Group and Herdy Burke Consulting. Of course, I am with I'm Danny Smith. I am with Impact Mortgage Group. And Herdy is the Herdy behind Herdy Burke Consulting. So enough of that. Herdy, today we're going to talk a little bit about accountability. This thing, there's a book. I'm about 15 to 17 years into this book. It's a real small book. It's only 109, 10, 11, 12, 15 pages long, and every page is about 2/3 full. There's a lot of, it's just a great, simple book. The book is by John G. Miller. In the podcast, in the show notes, there'll be a link to that to Amazon, by the way, and supporting my favorite nonprofit will get a portion of the sale through that smile.amazon.com. If everybody doesn't know about that, if you can sign up to sponsor or to give a little bit on every Amazon purchase to your favorite charity. So enough about that. Herdy, by the way, audience, I have not prepped Herdy for this other than sending him some overview information. Herdy, what do you think about when you think about accountability?
Well, I think there's two types. There's to yourself, and I think there's to the people around you. And and actually maybe there's so I would say to yourself, that is taking responsibility for your actions, what you have, how your values, how your morals are, all that fun stuff. And then the accountability to the people around you. And if we're talking about business, which or personal, it's making sure that we're true to the people around us and we're accountable to them.
Okay. Good. And I'm going to ask you to set aside your beliefs. I'm going to ask you to set aside what your thoughts are about this, and don't agree with me, but don't disagree. And we talk about this all the time, that it's a sign of an educated person that can consider somebody else's ideas without having to own them. This book right here it can be very controversial to people that like to blame others. It can be very controversial, or it is controversial to people that like to blame. It's controversial to people that they have a bent towards drama. It's controversial to people that want to fix other people, that want to criticize people. The question behind the question, and we'll get into what that means here in a minute, but by the way, there's a statement on, I think it's page 49. Hold on a second. Yep, after all these years, I remember it. There's a statement. Who do accountable people blame? The answer is no one, not even themselves. Now, you think about that. Who do accountable people blame? No one, not even themselves. Change that around a little bit. We should never blame anyone, including ourselves.
It's powerful.
Yeah. And, I've got other books that do a great job. Two of the books I can think of that do a great job describing accountability. One's the 12-week year. I'm not sure that Moran and Levington, the authors of the 12-week year, did not get their definition of accountability. They say it's ownership, not accountability. They got it, I think, out of John G. Miller's book, QBQ here. Also, the book we talked about last week, The Four Disciplines of Execution on podcast 1. It describes accountability very similarly. There's no contradiction between QBQ and the four disciplines of accountability and the 12-week year. It's in one word, it's ownership, or two words is taking ownership. Some people, they have to learn to accept ownership. I'm talking to somebody yesterday, one of our loan officers, and he said, "This is on me. I should have gotten that explanation from the borrower and understood what the borrower wanted, and this is on me." That's taking ownership, and all. Just here's some questions that are in the book. I want the audience, Herdy, if you got any, think about this. Think about these questions. Why do we have to go through all this change? Who dropped the ball? When is somebody going to train me? When is that department going to do its job right? So think about those and think about the feeling that you have. Why do we have to go through all those change? What's that? Sorry, go ahead. How do you feel? Yeah, what does it feel like? What's the emotion that's behind that?
So I haven't looked ahead, so I'm just giving you my off the top of my head answer, right, Danny? Right. And that is this. I feel like when we hear something or something's going wrong outside of us, the tendency is we first have a negative reaction. I think that's who we are. It's how we decide we're going to take that, count to 10 and take that next thing, whether we're going to either blame that party, blame the situation, blame the whatever that is.
Be a victim.
Be a victim. I think everybody's first reaction, because we like to defend ourselves, right, inside our hearts, is we're going to have come back negatively at first.
Yeah.
It's the maturity level that gets it to the next level, right? How am I going to extend this out to these people, this group, this business? What am I going to do? Am I going to take ownership, or am I going to stay stuck in this?
Okay.
That's what I heard when you said that.
Okay. So
in my head,
I'm gonna repeat a why, or all of those questions were started with why or when, and the focus is on somebody else. All right. Who dropped the ball? How about this question instead? How can I contribute? Why do we have to go through this change? How about this question instead? How can I adapt to the changing world? When is somebody going to train me? Versus what can I do to develop myself? When is that department going to do its job right versus what can I do to solve the problem? Been about 10 years ago, and at corporate we had 120 people, and we invited in a trainer from QBQ to go through and train all of our employees. And we divided it up. There were 4 classes, each class an hour long. And you had about 6 opportunities to get started on a class. And leading up to the last 2 starts, when we told people, this is mandatory. You have to go through this QBQ. There were a few people that waited till the last class to take the 4 classes. And one guy didn't start. Now, this was a 35-year-old, 35, 40-year-old, married, making more money he'd ever made in his life. What I consider was a great job. And I told him, I said, and I'll say his name was John. I said, John, you're either going to take this class. We've told everybody this is mandatory. If you don't take this class, you're going to be terminated. And I said, so will you go in there and get the class, get ready to get started? He said, I think you need to terminate me. I don't believe in that crap. And we need to blame people. So he was fired. He was terminated. And I had no, and there were a few other people that took the class. We had some open discussions about it, and people just want to blame other people. And we see a lot of it going on in our society. One of the chapters is entitled "A Poor Sailor," in the book QBQ. A poor sailor blames the wind. And I'm going to get to the QBQ, the question behind the question. I'm going to get all to that in a minute. And actually a couple of tools, a way to remember this and to start turning your, removing the blame. I'm just going to say that. A poor sailor blames the wind. Have you heard the saying, a poor sailor blames the wind? How about a poor worker blames the tool? A poor coach blames the players. A poor teacher blames the students. A poor salesperson blames the market, the location, the customers. A poor parent blames their kids or the other parent or the grandparents. A poor manager blames who? A poor employee blames their employer, their working conditions, COVID, I guess. A poor coach blames. A poor teenager blames the world. So who do accountable people blame? Said this a while ago, no one, not even themselves. This book called The Question Behind the Question, Ernie, it boils down to, you don't ask questions that contain you or we or they. You ask questions that contain an I. You don't ask questions that start with who and when. You ask questions that start with what and where. Some of the chapter, these little quick chapters, and all the chapters no more than 3 pages long. There's questions like, he does a good job setting up scenarios and telling stories about people that blame themselves and others versus people that are looking for solutions. And so there's a well-established legal principle that says there's a difference between the letter and the spirit of the law. The letter of the law refers to specific words used in the law itself. The spirit refers to the underlying concepts and intentions behind the law. The general idea is that compliance with the letter of the law should be in alignment with the spirit of the law. So using that same content, and I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. 1, you begin with what or how, not why, when, or who. It contains action, focuses on action, and contains I, not they, them, we, or you. The spirit of QBQ is personal accountability. No more victim thinking, no more procrastination, no blaming. I can only take me, and that's what I have to take action on. So you consider these questions. What can I do to change? How can I take responsibility for this matter? Pretty simple, isn't it, Herdy?
No, it's not. Because you're at.
Wait. I'm going to argue with you. All you
Simple.
is not just ask what and where questions.
All right. So let me back up. It's simple in the fact that once you see it, hear it, and understand it, to implement it, which we'll do, it's fine. But no, if you've lived your whole life in that mentality, and you're going to have to literally retrain yourself, your brain, whatever, to start using the opposite tools. And if you're not willing to learn, then these will never apply to your life, and you will consistently be the opposite of who to accountability blame. No one. You will be the opposite person. You will always blame. You will always be in that mentality. So guess what? To change this, you have to have personal responsibility. You have to make a choice to decide to change.
Okay.
So that's not simple. Now, the concept is, you're right. You can argue with me. I got you. Yeah. But it's not simple if you've never done this.
It's probably the hardest simple thing.
No, Danny, that's not fair. You can't.
Most people have ever done.
Words in the same.
I've got people in my family that have argued this for years, and one in particular, and that person has come around in the last year.
Wow.
Maybe come back to that in a minute. I'm on page 39 in the book. Most of us have heard the saying, creativity is thinking outside the box. Right? There's a lot of truth in that, but to me, this is John Miller, and I agree 100% with this, and it's something I practice. But to me, true creativity is succeeding within the box. Go to my DannyLSmith.com site, you type that in, and as it flips through the URL up there at the top, as it's cycling, you'll see that the name of that blog was originally InsideTheBoxThinking.com. Back to what he says here, succeeding within the box, hitting targets, reaching goals, doing the job well, and making a difference with what we already have is the QBQ way. Repeat that. Making a difference, reaching goals, hitting targets, doing the job well is making a difference. It's about what we have already. That's the QBQ way. Every organization has imperfect systems and finite resources. We may wish we had better tools, newer tools, better systems, more people, bigger budgets, but thinking too much about what we'd like to have is another cause of procrastination. Managers, for example, won't take their group through team building until all the right people are in place. Individuals won't make a decision until they have all the information or take action until all the questions are answered. Ironically, succeeding with what we have makes us more likely to get the things we wanted in the first place. Listen to the wisdom of Deb Weber of State Farm Insurance. Quote, I find that every time I do the job with the tools I have, I tend to receive more tools, unquote. It's a truth. We sow, then we reap. Focusing on what we don't have is a waste of time and energy. To really make a difference, let's instead focus our energy on succeeding within the box. let's ask the question behind the question. How can I achieve with the resources I already have? That's the question behind the question. So the question of who's going to train me, instead of asking that, is how can I receive with the resources I already have?
So a good example might be that a person repeats something, maybe an addiction cycle or whatever, where they never feel good enough. So rather than work on becoming a better person, they quit because they say, well, I can never be good. So there comes that procrastination part of this piece, right? Well, I can never be good enough because look at the way I act. So they don't try to do anything. Right?
Right.
I can relate to that, for sure. But yeah, so interesting that that blame game stuff can lead to other things like procrastination, accountability issues. So it's rechanging the questions. I would recommend everybody get 3x5 cards and write these all down and carry them around for a week and see if it doesn't change their life.
Yep. This is one of those books, you and I've had this discussion before, that some books you have to rest in. You have to savor. You have to just, I've got this book. It's in every book we talk about on here. I have in a digital format, Kindle. I've got it in paper, and I've got it in Audible. I probably have 2 or 3 different summaries on it from what different people write about it. This QBQ, I follow John Miller on Facebook, interact with him on a regular basis. It's interesting. He'll post something and you'll see it. People that aren't used to him, they'll start blaming. They'll start going exactly the opposite. And he'll lead them back down a path. And you can tell the people all they want to do is blame and not practice.
Easy.
Yeah,
it's easy.
It really is. Not practice. How are we going to achieve? That's part of our culture with our branch here. Our loan officers. With Austin, my branch partner, son, and branch partner, is okay, guys. We don't have all this other stuff. How do we do it from where we're at with what we've got? I don't know if the story's in here or if I've just thought about it separately, but you remember Houston, we have a problem. Mm-hmm. Remember that statement?
I do.
And
Apollo 13.
And what did they do? They brought into that room full of engineers and scientists a box of stuff and dumped it on a table and said, that's what they have available up there to fix that problem that they've got. That's all the resources that those guys up there in Apollo 13 had. And they used whatever that stuff was in that box to figure out how to fix that problem so they could re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. That was the epitome of QBQ, right?
Because if they don't solve that problem, then they don't make it back alive. And so everything was what had to be done at that moment to get to the next moment, right? So they had to use the resources. Amazing.
So isn't it amazing that I had an employee that walked away from close to an $80,000 a year job because he didn't want to practice these statements. He wanted to blame. And we took it up as a corporate culture, part of our corporate culture of being leaders, leading leaders, is that reframe questions into a how or a where question. Instead of when am I going to be trained, you reframe it to what can I do to get trained?
Can't imagine that, but okay.
Yeah. I mean, literally, and that was the most extreme. We had others that just fought against it. And
That's being really hard-headed.
we saw performance go down with people that were their performance wasn't improving. Those that wanted to ask those why and when questions. We saw people that used the QBQ. You know, every question has action, includes I, and the question starts with, you know, what or how. Saw people their performance improve, their attitudes improve, and we were just a happier group of people. Bertie, that's all I've got.
Well, okay, so before you get off, two things. As
Okay.
your co-host, I want to move you along here. Can you give us some things we can do to help improve ourselves? How you went through the questions, but are there a couple things you can keep in front of mind? And would you mind giving us where they telling us the name of the book again and the author and where they can get it? And we'll put a link up on the podcast. It'll be on Apple and Google, by the way, when we're done. Can you give us some little hints on how to start retraining yourself out of this situation or out of the blame game?
Okay. And I'll say that this is the hardest simple thing you can do. Okay. Now you're shaking your head at me.
I am.
It's the hardest simple thing.
I don't get that, but okay.
It's hard to stop asking why and when questions about, you know, I could say, Herdy, you know, why don't you understand that? Why don't you
stupid, Danny? Because I'm
understand?
stupid. Right. That's what happens when you do that to somebody.
So I think, so instead of saying, Herdy, you know, why don't you understand that? Instead, I think, what can I say? Question starts with what, includes a I, and includes an action item. What can I say to Herdy? Well, one thing is, all right, Danny, you know, help him recognize that that all you have to do is reframe the question. Start with what or how, with include an I and an action item. All right.
Love it.
I've got to go in here in a few minutes, and I've got a meeting in about 30 minutes with an underwriter. And she's going to, we got a tough loan that we're working on getting approved. And actually, in one sense, you kind of think maybe the borrower is laundering money as much as he moves $20,000 and $30,000 around, okay, between accounts and sells stuff. So I'm thinking, how do I explain to the underwriter this flow of money from these accounts? So what I've already done is I've already I've labeled some things, you know, and written up a little legend and sent to her to talk about it. Hopefully that by the time we talk, she's read the email. So earlier I asked, can we have a meeting to talk about this? And please see the attached document. So I'm thinking, instead of trying to blame her for not being able to, I mean, I can see it in the documentation. We have to source where this money comes from for a down payment on a house. So I'm thinking, how can I explain to her this flow of funds and That's why I wrote up an explanation, kept it real simple as I could. Put some numbers on some documents, put numbers on corresponding documents, then put a legend there for her to say, okay, number 1 is attached to number 5, and just try to explain it to her. Back to your question though, I realize this is hard. And I've helped probably 300 people in the last 15 years work through QBQ and install QBQ in their environment. It's just a way of life for me. We've talked about speed of trust. There's certain books that's just part of my daily life in my thinking that's developed my thinking. Besides the Bible, there's the speed of trust, there's QBQ, and everyone communicates, few connect. All of that is just part of who I am by resting in these books, using some of the suggestions, not just reading the book, putting it down and moving on to something else. I mean, I go through a lot of books in a year, but I also revisit certain books and revisit certain parts of some of the books. And this one here is really simple. And again, the book's name is QBQ, the question behind the question. And it says what to really ask yourself to eliminate blame, complaining, and procrastination. So think about that. What to really ask yourself to eliminate blame, complaining, and procrastination. You ask yourself what and how questions that include I, talking about me, myself, and I, and an action item. That's what you really ask yourself. How do I do this with the resources I have?
So Danny, when a pitcher throws a fastball and the hitter hits it out of the park, that's the perfect thing in baseball, is the home run. That pitcher cannot turn around and look at the center fielder and go, I can't believe you made me throw that pitch. But yet, this is what we do all the time.
Yeah.
So, guys,
or the pitcher blames it on the catcher, and or the you got a signal from the pitching coach, or well, I think there was a rock in my shoe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I landed just a little bit wrong. I threw that. What happened? I landed just a little. You like bringing it back around to baseball. I like it too. Yeah.
Well, and it just made it simple for me to understand that when that guy hits that home run, right, and the pitcher's the guy on the mound throwing the ball, I don't care if he got a number 2 or 1 or slipped or fell, he threw the pitch. He can't turn around and blame the center fielder for throwing the home run pitch. That's right. But we do it all the time.
Yeah, we do. In
our real life.
Yeah.
So good. So we got the book, we got the author, guys. Danny, thank you. Awesome.
Thank you, Herdy.
Listen, we want to thank our listeners for paying attention to the podcast. This is the second one on the What About Books. And guys, we get on when we feel like it. We try to do it weekly, or we may do 2 a week. You never know, but come look for What About Books on Google and Apple podcast platforms. It's there. It's also on YouTube. It's also on the Lipson podcast. We can share links. Danny shares those out to his database. But Danny, thanks again. And guys, we'll see you probably next week, or you'll hear from us next week on the podcast. So just have a great afternoon. Danny, thank you.
Thank you, Herdy. Appreciate it.